Okay, so welcome back to lesson number, I think it's 4, I can't remember at the moment to be honest, but we're on our facial tracking course within Nuke, okay? So we've just done the camera solve and we've got an error of 1.12, which like I said is really good. What we can do now is we can start getting rid of some of the bad tracks. So if we come into auto tracks, first of all what we can do is click delete unsolved, okay, because see these red ones, they didn't solve these, so delete rejected, delete rejected, and it'll get rid, yes, just click yes, and it'll get rid of those red ones. Okay, cool. If you've got any orange ones you can click delete unsolved, but I don't think I've got any orange. Cool. What we can do is if we hit tab on the keyboard, we can actually go into the 3D view and we can move around, and you can actually see actually it's given us a really good mesh of the head. Now there are a couple things, so if we have a look in here we can see these points by here, it's generated a little sort of point cloud for us, and these points, well they're not on the face, so these look as if they're quite problematic. And another thing to notice is earlier you can see there's two sort of crosshairs. You can see the user tracks are these yellow little big crosshairs, and you can see there's two but they're very close to each other, two very close to each other. They should, this is because I used two different tracks because they went out of frame, but basically the closer together that these are, if they were on top of each other and you could only see one, that means that you've tracked the exact same sort of pixel. So you can, the fact that these are, you can see these are close together and they're not exactly on top of each other, it doesn't really matter, but yeah, that's what's happening there. So what we want to do is we want to start going through and we want to start deleting these points which look problematic, like they're attached to nothing. So the way in which we do this is kind of, it's not the simplest way. It's easy, but it would be easier if Nuke would just let us select these points and click delete. But Nuke being Nuke, it doesn't, and we can't even go into vertex mode, vertex selection, see, and we can't even do it within that. Okay, so it is a bit of a pain. Now what I'm going to do to get around this is new comp viewer, so viewer, new comp viewer, and it'll give me viewer 2, and there you go. If we just connect viewer 2 to our tracker as well, and I'm going to pull viewer 2 and I'm just going to pull it to the side, the side there, and it'll go into a new comp viewer. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to scroll through. I've got a 2D view by here and a 3D view by here. We're looking at the same node, but viewer 2 is in 2D and we're in 3D. You can see as I highlight stuff, it's highlighting those points within my 3D view, and even though even though even though I'm selecting all of these, it's only on one side of the face because we're only on one particular frame and it's only got that half of the face at the moment. So what you've basically got to do is you've got to scroll through and you've got to highlight some of these until these problematic points by here turn yellow, and then within here we can select them and delete them individually. So literally just carry on scrolling through and selecting our points. Right, I've selected a few there, so a few of these have been selected. So what I can do is trial and error. It's not in this part, it's not in this part. They're probably then, so let's come in, they're probably further up here. So as I select these yellow bits, you've got to look and see if they're getting selected on this side. And I can't see them, so actually, weirdly, these points are looking as if they're further up here. So I think they're some of the nose points, but they're way off, aren't they? So that's annoying, and that keeps on. Whenever you hover over one of your user tracks, it keeps on popping up there. So another way is looking on the left is just by hovering over, see until you find one of them. It is a pain, to be honest. Okay, so I found where some of them are. You see as I hover over this point by here on the left, this sort of this point lights up. So I can click that one and I know I can delete it. So there's a couple within here. So if I click and drag, yeah, we got a couple of them there. So I'm just going to delete this bunch, and it takes a while to kind of find them because you have to scrub through the whole piece of footage and then highlight different bits, but eventually you can get them. So again, these ones, yeah, I'm going to delete them, and it's just going to delete those on the outside. So I think it's just the side of the ear by here, really. Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to delete these and just click delete. It'll take a little bit of time sometimes. Yeah, and that's it. So looking through my mesh now, there are kind of a couple down here. So if I can find them, that would be advantageous. And for the rest of it, it's actually fine. It's actually looking okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if I can pinpoint exactly where these points are. So if I zoom out again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole frame. Okay, I know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are in this frame. So I'm going to start this side of the head. Yeah, they're in this side of the head. So just come off. Right. So those 2 points are in there. Okay, so I've managed to find one of them is a point within here. So if I click that, you can see it's a yellow on that side as well. I'll just click delete. And I reckon, I'm hoping this point, yeah, is another one. Normally when you find one, you can kind of find that they're sitting in the same area. Okay, I really struggled to find these little points by here, and I was about to give up. But what I did think is, with the eyes, you don't really want tracking points on the eyes, because the eyes are the only part of the face that's moving. So I will normally come through and I'll delete the eyes, and I realised that that's where some of them were. So that is a good thing to kind of look for as well. Again, you don't really, even though they're not saying they're problematic, you don't really want tracking points on the eyes, because the eyes do move. So the last thing I'll do to kind of clean this up is just come through, and don't worry about deleting all of the eye ones, but I will delete most of the kind of eye tracks because the eyes do move. Okay, and they could provide some good tracking points, to be honest, for the most part, but because we can't trust them entirely, you know, stuff like freckles and blemishes, we know that they have to move with the face, and the skin isn't deforming, like the actor isn't smiling or anything like that. So for the most part, I'll come across and I'll delete most of the eye ones, which seems problematic because you think there's loads of tracking markers there. But to be honest, it is kind of best practice, because the eyes do move about, and I'm definitely not going to be able to get them all. That is for sure. Like you can see, there's still some around here. I'm not going to be able to get them all, but it can sometimes help, okay? Because these will have a higher error than most at some point. Okay, so I'm just going to work through and continue to delete the rest of the eye ones, and then I'll bring you back. Okay, so now that I've done that, it is a tedious way, but there is a second way you can help, okay? You can see I've deleted most of the eye ones, and you can see I've got 2 nice eye holes there. But there is another thing you can do. Again, picking off the 1 or 2 random points off there is really difficult, and you definitely can do it just by that way. But what we can also do is, if we go into auto tracks, we can use the graphs within here. So minimum length, we set earlier, minimum length of track is to 15. Now what you can do is you can increase this and say actually minimum length 20, and that'll get rid of some potentially problematic ones. So if you click tracks minimum length and also the min length by here, control click them both and hit F on your keyboard, you'll see the line is set to 15. And basically this graph can sometimes be a nice way of seeing what it's deleting. So if you were to increase this, for example, it'll get rid of, you can see a few of them go red as I increase this. It'll get rid of a few potentially problematic ones. So I'm just going to increase that to 18. Okay, so it's cutting off everything below. I'm also going to go to max track error, okay, and I'm going to use this and I'm going to bring it down. So if we click max track error, or error track, sorry, there we go, error track, yeah, basically we can move this down and also control click max track error. We can move this and basically it'll start, the more we decrease it, the more it'll kind of get rid of. So you don't want to get rid of too many. I don't tend to use the graphs to kind of look at, because they do make sense to me, but I just prefer to look here to see actually how many it's getting rid of. That's a better representation. So I'm going to move this down to maybe about 2, I think, or 1.8 actually. Actually, let's put it to 2 because we're yet to do the bottom one. So max error. This says that the maximum error an individual tracker can have is 8 pixels, okay, or a value of 8.76. So I want to decrease this quite a bit. I want to bring this to about maybe 3, yeah, try 3. So you can see it's gotten rid of a lot. What we can do now is click delete rejected, which is those red ones. Okay, and what will happen then is it'll get rid of those reds, and you can see it's already brought our solve error down to 0.83, but that's not like final. It's saying I estimate you can get to around 0.83. So what we need to do is we need to come back and we need to click solve. Some people click update solve, some people click solve. I click solve. Okay, so I'm just going to click solve, and yes, it's going to reset our current solve. Am I sure? Yes. And then these views should reset once it's solved, so let it just go through, and hopefully that'll now get rid of some of our problematic tracks, and I'm hoping it'll still stick around 0.8, 0.83. That'll be a good error to have. So it went down from 0.83 to 0.8. So you can see the benefit of resolving. Sometimes it'll go back up, but you've got to resolve or update your solve. I just tend to resolve, okay? So it went from an estimated 0.83 to 0.8, which is great. And as we go through, you can still see we got a lot of tracks. Still got a red one in there for some reason, but we still got plenty of tracks, and it represents our face really, really well. So what you can do is, I'm pretty happy just to leave it there, actually. That's really good. 0.8 solve is really good. So what we can start doing now is we're going to start orienting our scene properly. So later on, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to generate a mesh and export it to Maya. So in the camera tracker, we've got a scene tab, and we can set up our scene within here. So what I want to do is, in our 3D view, I want this to be in the center of our grid, because that's, especially if you pass into another artist or whatever, it needs to be set up. And I want to pick the lowest possible point, or one of the lowest points within here. So this looks like a low point, and where is it in here? Yeah, it's relatively low. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click that, and I'm going to say ground plane set origin. And you'll see in the 3D view it's disappeared. But what has actually happened is that point in 3D space has been set to the center origin of our grid. Okay, so let's put it bang in the middle, which is awesome. Okay, and what you can do now is you can start utilizing. Oh, I don't like this 3D view. It's a bit different to Maya. What you can do is you can start moving this around and just pulling it above. Okay, pulling it above the grid. There, we can see the gizmo in there. Pulling it above the grid. So you can see, let's move this back. There you go. You can see now we've got this little gizmo, so we can actually move this up. Now it is pretty tricky to see that. You may want to be actually viewing from the front, for example, and it's pretty tricky to view that gizmo, and you can see it and you can pull it up. But also, if you want to, you can use the view in here. So if I click in here and just use my scroll wheel, I'm pushing it up. Okay, pushing it up just off the floor, because I think that point, if I set it back to 0, you can see, I think a few of the points, yeah, they're going through the floor. So I can just get my gizmo, that green line there, by double clicking a tracker node and pull it up, or I can just input some numbers in here. So 0.0096, yeah, that's fine. What we can also do is we can just make sure that this is orientated correctly. So if I hold control, you see that gizmo turns into this little rotate wheel. So I can just rotate it around, and that's too much, obviously. So you can rotate it around like that, yeah, just to get it all matching up. And then I'm also going to spin around, because he may be tilting forward a little bit, so we just want to check that. And you could probably do with tilting back just a touch. So if I hold control, you can see I got the red one to rotate on the side, and I'm just going to pull it up a little bit like so. And that's basically setting it up properly for the next artist, okay? So it's orientating it properly. In scene scale now, for the scale, uniform scale, in Maya, this will be quite a bit smaller. The dimensions are set up differently in Nuke. So what you want to do, uniform scale, instead of 1, just multiply that by 10. So change it to 10, and that'll go a lot bigger. But when we look into Maya, all we need to do to make it look normal here is we just need to zoom out. And in Maya, it's going to be a lot more appropriate size for us to work with. Okay, so we've set up our scene. The next thing that we can do now is we can actually start exporting from the camera tracker. So if we come back into the camera tracker, 0.8, I could push it further, but to be honest, I'm happy with that. That's really good. Anything below 1 really. Again, you could push it to 0.6 if you wanted, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to because I know it'll work well enough. So what we can do is, you've got export options, so we can create a camera. So if we just click create, we've got a camera. And what we can do now in our 3D view is if we change from default to, we should be able to look through camera. Yeah, camera 1. What we can do is, let's just close viewer 2 because we don't actually need 2 viewers anymore. And then close the pane. What we can do is we can actually look through our camera, and you can see that we've now got a moving camera, which you may think is a little bit backwards because we're actually tracking a moving face, but Nuke doesn't have an object tracker, so it's actually fine. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to go into default view, and I'm going to come back. Yeah, and we're here. So coming back into our camera tracker, we exported a camera. That's great, but we can actually export more. We can export a scene. So let's see what happens if we export a scene. So scene, create. It gives us a few different nodes. So let's have a look at this. We've got a camera, we've got a scene node, and we've got a camera point cloud. So let's just hook our view up to the scene node and click tab to come into 3D view. You can see point cloud has given us, the camera tracker actually gave us a point cloud which we were viewing earlier. So if we view that, we've actually got one through the camera tracker, but it exports one out, so it's just points in 3D space, okay? So if we view that one, you can see points in 3D space. And we've got a camera, and they plug into a scene node, so we can view multiple things together. So that's what the scene does. It creates a scene with loads of different things, but what we want is going to be something called a scene plus, because that gives you everything. And if you don't want certain stuff, well, you can literally just delete it. So I'm going to click create for scene plus, give it a little bit of time, and it gives us loads more nodes, which is great. So I'm going to move these over, apart from the shuffle. So we'll move them over here. So we've got a camera tracker, and we've also got within here a lens distortion node. Now we actually said there was no lens distortion, so I'm going to delete mine. I don't need it. So what we've got is, we've got an additional scanline render node. So scanline render node, let's view here. What that does is it takes our 3D scene. So if we view the scene node, it's this sort of point cloud in 3D. It takes that, and it takes the camera, and it takes the object or the scene, and it then come out into our 2D view. It shows us that in a 2D view, because what's happening here is the camera, this camera, is moving around a 3D point cloud, and it's showing us exactly how that looks on each different frame, because the camera is moving around that 3D point cloud. So what we can do is we've got a BG background node here. So if we get our footage, so let's just copy our footage and plug that into the background, you'll now see that these points are moving with the head, because like I said, we've got our camera being plugged in and our object or our point cloud. So we've got our camera and our point cloud, and that's basically like we saw in our 3D view. Let's have a look. Our camera is basically flying around that, and when we look at the scanline renderer, it's like we're viewing through the camera. So that's why we see what looks like a moving face. Okay, it's not a moving face, it's a moving camera, and it's moving around a point cloud. And then just hook up our background, and it's, you know, play that through, and it's actually matching up quite well. So we can actually have a test of just how well this is working. So if we go into our camera tracker point cloud, this is the point cloud it exported. What we can do is we can turn the size down. So let's turn it to, yeah, something like 1.7, okay? Now when we play it, because before the points were too large, so even if we turn it down to 1, something like that, 1.2, now if we play it through, we can actually look and we can see if these points are actually moving with our footage. So I'll pause it as mine plays in. Okay, so I previewed mine in, and it's annoying, it's previewed all but one frame, so I'm just going to skip ahead a frame, and as we play it now, you can see that these points actually move with the face. And again, we have got a few like down here which are sort of too far away from the face, like and these ones here don't move with it, but the 99% of them do. So that's going to work well for us. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can generate a mesh from this point cloud using a point cloud generator and using this camera, and then we're going to export that. And yeah, well, I won't give too much away, but that's a few lessons time. So yeah, join me in the next lesson and we'll create a mesh for this face.